asked about whether he's better than Lewis or not, right?
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, yeah. As the question was, who's better,
yeah,
Lewis or Fernando?
or
And Tony
Fernando.
Kanaan and Rubens Barrichello were on it as well. It was just quite a nuanced answer. It just made me think a little bit about where my allegiances um, had lain up until sort of 2012, 2013. And it was and it was weird thinking about it because I was definitely a big Schumacher fan. You know, 96 to 2000, it was all Michael Schumacher. Um, and you know, it did get a bit dull. Like, I have to say, my recollection of 2004 is pretty bad. Like, I don't think I watched very much of 2004 at all because it was all just it was a bit dull. Um, and then and then when Fernando came along and actually he started winning a lot of stuff, I was actually really pleased that he was winning, and it was less because he was because I was bored of what had come before. It didn't really matter about that. It didn't really matter that there was just somebody new winning, but it would, you know, it was nice to have seen that progression of how Renault and Fernando had gone from sort of building up to challenging for their first world title in 2005. Um, uh, and and there was and I was thinking about why is it that, you know, the same kind of thing has happened now with Max. You know, Max has come along and he's like the new kid on the block. Like, why do I not enjoy watching him? As you know, why am I not rooting for him when, you know, Lewis has been winning for such a long time? And you know, I guess the only conclusion I could really come to was that the way that Michael won and the way that Michael went about his racing was very, very absolute. And there was a, you know, every racing driver, I guess, wants to win and will do what they need to win, but where Fernando was using sort of a really high level thinking kind of thing, you know, the the pit box thing in Hungary, the you know, the way that he gave the place back to Christian Klein in the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix, was looking where he was coming through the chicane before he got overtook, and then got him again, and you know, all those kind of things. That's like high level thinking for me, right? Combined with the level of bravery that he had, and the level of speed and everything and adaptability that he had as well. Whereas Schumacher was much more like Senna in the regard that he would be like, I'm on track and you will bend to my will, and I'll push you into the wall if you don't do what I want you to do, or I'll push you in the gravel trap, or I'll dump my car into Raskas. And you know, that it wasn't the same. So you had that sort of really clean driving but high IQ driver like Fernando overtaking, like, coming along and pushing out Michael, who was, you know, not the same, not on that kind of level. And now what I'm seeing is that sort of class of driver, the driver that will drive clean, will think about what they're doing, will know when to put the hammer down, you know, is being replaced again with the kind of driver that I thought we'd got away from, that is happy to pull a dive bomb and push their rival off the road. And you know, maybe you can you happy for intimidation to be their modus operandi, rather than sort of clever wheel-to-wheel racing, or clever understanding of a race's dynamics. And maybe that's why I haven't warmed to Max as much as I did to Fernando when there was a changing of the guard before. I know. What do you think?
So I have two questions for you actually coming off of
Yeah.
that. One, where do you put Lewis in this, right? Is he, because he certainly doesn't seem like someone who would just send it in for the heck of sending it in and sort of play this, I guess, a bully game, right? Based on what you're saying, which is it's either me getting through or neither of us are getting through kind of thing, right? Where does he stack in there? Because he doesn't come off as someone that would force you into, you know, I guess getting off the track essentially just to avoid collision, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lewis has always been a fairly clean driver, but he's also evolved, and I think he's had to evolve to the style of the racing that he was involved in and what was needed to win. And I think that high level of racing brain, of understanding a race's dynamics and what was needed from the tires, from the pit stops, from like when do I need to overtake or when is it okay for me to hang back because the race will come to me. That wasn't there in 2007 and 2008. And I think when you watch those seasons back again now, Lewis's high points were super high. You know, he was on the podium in the first 9 races of 2007. You know, that doesn't come without a level of skill. But I think when you look at how those positions equated to his final championship result, you know, there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I don't think he quite understood at that stage of his career what was needed to marry all those things together. Whereas I think now, especially since sort of 2016, 2017 onwards, he started to really sort of focus on those tiny little things that will gain him time, that will gain him a better understanding of when he needs to push, when he needs to hang back, when he needs to look after his tires, when he needs to go for it. And he's become much more of a Fernando-esque driver, but kept the sort of aggression that he had in the 07-08 seasons. I think other things have crept into his game as well, which are cool, but actually that I think for me is the biggest thing that I've seen Lewis develop into. And I think in terms of where that leaves him, I think a guy that was already fundamentally faster than Fernando over a lap and over a race stint, in my opinion, I think it's marginal. I think it's close, but certainly even over 07 and 08, he seemed to show that he had that. To have that and then have the racing brain on top of it as well. I think that's why for me at the moment he's arguably the greatest driver on the grid at the moment, perhaps the greatest there's ever been. And certainly that's what puts him into that conversation.
My other question to you was sort of along this lines of what you said about Schumacher and Max to some extent, going back to Senna. I wonder what you think about that style of driving, because it has been rewarded, right? I mean, you just have to look at the results to see. I guess we could argue about Max's 2 titles, because one was one was a bit at the end, and then the last year was they're just Red Bull being dominant, right? But I feel, and I would love to know what you think, is I feel that style of driving is rewarded at every level. I mean, by design, that's encouraged, in my opinion, because that allows for whatever the race results be, right? That also allows Formula One to be Formula One in some ways and have that appeal with the audience, where that level of overtaking, which F1 has strived to get by virtue of all these regulations and rules and whatnot. I think that level of driving and that style of driving has always been something that has, I guess, historically been a fabric of race winning, sort of elements. And I don't know if you feel that way or not, given what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this as well. I was just thinking about sort of the drivers that have won the most sort of titles and how they've won them. Schumacher, I guess, is the anomaly within that, in that he wasn't a very aggressive driver, but actually his greatest level of success came at a time when actually he didn't need to drive like that. He had a car and a teammate that meant that he didn't need to be that aggressive, and he could hang back and he could charge when he needed to, and he did that very, very well. And actually the seasons where he tried to push his luck, 94 again is the anomaly there, where he, that kind of aggression, it wasn't even aggression, that was just petulance, really, that I have to win this title, the other guy's not going to win it, it's going to be me. that level of petulance won it for him, but actually it backfired on him 3 years later in '97. So actually, I don't think that benefited him. And actually, if you then look at the drivers that have the most titles, people like Fangio wasn't that kind of driver. He was all about how quickly he could get the car going and being in the right car at the right time. Jim Clark was similar. Alain Prost was very similar. Thinking man's drivers. And Lewis has become that as well. Like, he won one title when he was being super aggressive, but then he's won the bulk of his titles when he's actually put together an entire season and thought about the picture as a whole. So I'd argue that actually that is the way to win multiple titles and be consistently rewarded with success, not the gung-ho shove it down the inside every single time. I think even Senna, again, in 90 and 91, when he won those titles, he was aggressive, but he also had a car that allowed him to do that. So I think actually, yes, I think a lot of drivers come into the sport really aggressive, wanting to prove a point, and they get a reputation for being sort of aggressive and intimidating. But actually, then as you look at them across their career, and the more the success comes, that the less they have to do that. It is what I think when you look across these people's careers. I don't know what you think. Amar, you're on mute, man.
I also wonder if this is a personality attribute, right? Because to your point of, I'm the new kid on the block, I need to prove a point, I win a title, and then maybe things change a little bit, versus someone like an Alonso who didn't need to be that way, right? And there's a part of me that feels that this is more of a factor of who you are as a person, or how you sort of approach life in general, right? I felt that way with Kimi too, right? I mean, I never would put him as someone that was overtly aggressive, irrational, and really good at managing a race, really good at managing a season too, and knowing when to sort of push hard and pull back. And Lewis has done that in many ways. I also think that a lot of it has come with the winning aspect of it too. And I was going to say, I actually saw Max do a little bit of that last year too, right? When I think having that title under his belt, you could tell changed him. And even though, Ferrari were, I guess, in hindsight, not really in it as much as we all believed, at least at those different points up until the summer break, it seemed like he was willing to dial it back, except for when we got towards the end, and then Brazil was just what it was. But
yeah, but again, who was that against? There's always an element of having to prove that you're better than the guy that's king of the hill. Schumacher thought that about Senna, and Fernando thought that about Michael.
Yes, indeed. I think you're right,
and I think
that.
Lewis even thought that about Fernando when he turned up. And so I don't think that's I don't think that's necessarily an unpredictable trait. I think that's exactly what you'd expect someone like Max to do when he's coming up.
Yeah.
And I think Lewis even said that this week, that he understands why he might have a target on his back, because he knew that when he came into the sport, there was somebody else with a target on their back, and he went for them.
Indeed. And I think that's great motivation for him too. And I think the one thing also that I feel is a factor in all of this is the level of sophistication and technology, and just the knowledge around, race management, car development, etc., that drivers have had to get into way more than they did in the past, right? I mean, now you no longer can just be, I guess you probably could be, if you were just that skilled, just be focused on one thing and one thing only, which is just being able to drive a car, drive it as fast as you could. But with the way Formula One has evolved from a technical standpoint, from a race management standpoint, it's no longer about just being the fastest guy, right? And that's an interesting element of driver development. And I would agree, Alonso has proven, even in these last couple of years at Alpine, he has really got the smarts to be able to manage races, even though he's not in it for the win, right? And I think, you could. I would not argue too much with your sort of assertion of Alonso being perhaps one of the most talented overall sort of race driver, right, in the sport. And That's really interesting because I've always thought of Kimi as being in that role too, but I think Alonso also had the street smarts to go along with it. Kimi was probably more focused on the actual racetrack element of it. If you see how Alonso plays things out in the press too, that's also very smart and cheeky at times. And I think that's those are all elements of what sort of make
Yeah,
you who you are too.
yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a tension between the type of driver that just enjoys going really fast and is really good at that, Kimi, versus the driver that just wants to win, right? And yes, they enjoy driving, but that's secondary to winning everything. That's where they get their buzz.
Yep.
And that works for Kimi in terms of, at a time when everything suited him, like the Michelin tires were suited to how he wanted to drive. The cars were light, they were nimble, they were agile, the way he wanted them to be. It all worked out really, really nicely for him. But as soon as the car sort of drifted away from his style of driving, he didn't really want to adapt to the car. He wanted the car to be brought back to him, even if that meant that the car would be slower. And it meant that, often his teammates would be beating him. Whereas Fernando has been much more adaptable in that he knows that often the car that he's not comfortable with initially is the car that will be fast, and he's adapted his own style to do that. He had an absolutely crazy way of driving that understeery Renault back in 2005. And the way those V10 cars drove versus how the current turbo hybrids drive, complete sea change, completely different. And he's still managing to be, arguably he was still ahead of his teammate last season, not on points, but in terms of his performances. So that gives you an idea of how much he wants to win as opposed to just drive around.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt the way he's innovated himself across everything, right? The changes is just amazing. Like that by itself, forget everything else, right? The fact that you have to drive through these different setups and all the regulation, everything that's happened, right? I mean, from the time that he got in here to now, what is he on his 16th, 17th season?
Yeah, 2001
season,
he came
2001,
in,
so 20th season actually, right? Or 20, I have the math wrong, 21st season.
He's missed 3 seasons within that, right? So he left in 2018, so 19 and 20 he wasn't around, and also 2002 he skipped a season as well.
But even in just the 2 decades of innovation that he has,
unbelievable. I mean, how much has F1 changed in that time?
Amazing,
right? And he's still competitive. It's just ridiculous.
And I even when Checo got picked up by Red Bull, part of me wondered whether they would reach out to Alonso and bring him in there, and that would have been interesting. I mean, this was just a pipe dream, right? It probably was never going to happen, but wouldn't that have been fun, right? Having Max and Alonso go at it, and Alonso is not going to give.
I would love to see that.
And Fernando is not going to give an inch either, right? And that would have been I don't know that there would be a more a combustible pairing than that one.
And it would be interesting to see if Fernando has learned from his previous dealings with teams that his biggest failing has always been that he needs the team to be around him, because like I said, because it's about winning, everything has to be catered to him. He may not admit it, and he doesn't. If you listen to that podcast, he won't get into this. But the fact that the team sort of gravitated towards Lewis in 2007 must have played on his mind, because that it's just not how he wants to go driving, right? And I think if he ends up at Red Bull, where you've already got Max ensconced within that team, and Max himself is already somebody that needs the team to be focused on him. You could tell that from the way he played the whole Brazil thing this year. Having those 2 drivers, you can't have both the drivers sort of getting everything all the time. It doesn't work like that.
I want a team to do that, like just for the optics of it, just for the entertainment, and like if this is
put those 2 particular drivers
put something like that together, right? But I would just also say that you look at what Checo was able to do, although it was a brief period of time. Don't you think that with everything that you said about Fernando right now, and we know about him, right? That he would have adapted. Like, we don't know. Yes, you're right that he would need the team.
100%.
Sure. And but that would have been a bit of a toss-up, I think. I mean, depending on how a couple of races go, and you never know how that goes. And maybe that would have been wouldn't that have been fun to add to the 2021 mix, right?
But that's why I think they wouldn't. They're not going to do that. And Fernando's had conversations with Red Bull in the past, and it hasn't happened. And you can understand why, because he's just the kind of guy that will, disrupt their equilibrium. Totally. That's not the kind of guy that you need in a team where everything's set up so nicely to succeed. You don't want this tornado to turn up and go, yeah, I'm awesome. You need to change everything for me.
Isn't this exactly why? I mean, we have this. I mean, it's rumored or it's written about that he has this reputation of being a bit of a hard nose with inside the team and rubbing people the wrong way, right? It's probably a byproduct of him being very demanding, I imagine.
Yeah, but there has to be a way to handle it. There's a story from 2000 and I can't remember, it's 2005 or 2006. I think it was 2006, when he was kicked out of qualifying in Monza for obstructing Felipe Massa, right? So he was miles up the road, but Massa could see him, and Massa was like, he got in my way and disrupted my qualifying lap, right? So Fernando got disqualified, and he ended up like getting in a massive huff. And from what I understand, the Renault team, what they did, they locked him away. They literally put him in a cargo container, locked the door, and just let him calm down on his own, and then opened it up when he was a bit calmer and said, right, let's go drive. Like they didn't sort of go, oh my God, I'm really sorry, Fernando, and tried to pander to that. They just went, okay, he's having one of his meltdowns again. Let him have his meltdown, and then we'll let him back out again.
What an amazing place to be in, where that is the type of treatment you get. Like that's quite the
But you have to have a team that understands how you operate, right? Yeah. Which is why I think he keeps going back to Enstone all the time. That they're family for him, right? They understand how he works. And I'll be really interested to see how he butts heads with Lawrence Stroll, Aston, when he starts to potentially show up the favoured son.
That's one of my looking forward to the 2023 season things, right? Is how will that dynamic work, especially because they've gotten into each other a couple of times, right? I mean, we witnessed one of those at Austin. That was and then I think there was another one. I think it was in Brazil or or Mexico, maybe. I forget what that was. We definitely saw the Austin one. It was not too far from where we were. So
it was a long straight though. I think we missed some of the detritus. We just saw the skid marks after. It's fun. Yeah, so I think Fernando is a really interesting character. But there's a unbelievably ferocious competitor, one of the best. But there are like understandable reasons why he's not had more success than he has, and I think some of those are why his peers have done much better than he has over the same kind of time period.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, for someone that has been so adaptable, so focused, so good and like so great, right? In every way that you could imagine. And so this goes back to my question of, is that style of driving then rewarded or not? Or is this just a personality trait issue?
I mean, I've got another sort of theory about Fernando versus his peers, which I think feeds into that a little bit. I think he likes this romantic notion of like, I'm so adaptable that whatever car you give me, I'll absolutely drive the nuts off it. And he's shown it time and time again. I mean, you saw the 2012 season where he took what was ostensibly the fourth fastest car on the grid and took it to within 3 points of a driver's title. I.e. putting a car that has no business being that high up in the standings. Mm-hmm. But you've got to ask yourself, is that the approach that you should be taking in this era of Formula One, right? Where marginal gains are so important, where every tenth is important, where your team is also just as important as you are. And you compare that to what sort of Lewis does at Mercedes, and the way that rather than just taking what he's given and maximizing that, he will do that. But rather than doing that and being satisfied with the fact that he is maximizing what that car can do, he'll go back to the team and say, look, this isn't working. This is where we need to keep. This is where we need to develop. And right, give me more stuff to try out so we can try more stuff back out at the factory, so we can put more stuff on the car. We can develop the car faster, so that actually there's much more harmony between my ability and the car's ability. So that, because ultimately that's got to be the fastest combination. The fastest combination isn't a slow car with a really quick driver, or a really quick driver with a slower car. It's the meshing of those two things together. And actually, both Max and Lewis have shown that this season, right? That for both of them, when the car wasn't quite as good as it could be, when the Red Bull was overweight and understeer at the beginning of the season, Perez was much closer to Max, and George was ahead of Lewis in the at the beginning of the season. And then when the car started to get faster overall and get better overall, those two started to become much better, right? And you've got to ask yourself, like, what do you want from your driver? Do you want your driver to be like Fernando, who will drive the nuts off it even when it's rubbish, but the car will remain rubbish? Or do you want someone that isn't gonna get the ultimate results when the car isn't quite there, but when the car is there, is going to take it to heights beyond which any other driver can get it?
So this also then goes back to driver input and involvement into the development of the car, right? Because Max and Lewis seem to, at least from the outside, and certainly Lewis has developed this reputation of being very embedded with sort of the developmental aspects of the car, and Max has too, I think.
I think so too. I think Max definitely has.
I guess then is Fernando as involved as he should be, or maybe his involvement is backfiring, or maybe it is not. Maybe that is probably his weakest point, if you will. If there's one area to be, sort of be pointing fingers at, too, rather.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, if you take that away, if you get him to develop a car, does that take away the essence of Fernando and what we love about him so much? Would we have had a 2012 season if that the way that season played out, if the car had developed to a level that it was as good as a Red Bull? I don't think it would have been anywhere near as interesting as watching Fernando have that rear guard action, towards the end of the season. It was just exhilarating to watch, and it wouldn't have been like that if the cars were more equal, I think.
This is the beauty of the sport too, is right, there's no one combination that works best. That you just have to try to keep massaging it, try to keep making things better, and then there's also an element of what others are doing, right? And sometimes you're in the right place at the right time, other times you sort of make it the right place in the right time, and it's sort of interesting to see. And that's what keeps the sport entertaining too, right? Is you have a Fernando Alonso in the mix that sort of does these wild things that no one else can seemingly do. And yet, the results don't show what they probably should, right? So I guess if we were to just do the unfortunate thing of measuring titles only, then that does not do justice to what he's meant to the sport and what he's meant to many teams now. Almost all the teams really on the grid. So
but as I say, if you take that away and you gave him more success, does that take something away from Fernando? I don't know the answer to that. But I do find this whole debate quite interesting. I mean, Senna's another good example of this. I think that the titles that he won in a very sort of I'm going to win. I'm going to be first in every qualifying session. I'm going to win every race. That's how I'm going to win it. 88, 90, and 91. All three seasons were like that. But then you come into sort of 94, and although he still had that kind of, I'm just gonna absolutely nail it because I need to right now because the car isn't good enough for me not to do that. You could sense, especially as the first two races and then Imola, even that weekend started to unfold. You could tell that he was starting to soften his stance, and that actually, he was thinking much more about sort of, what the worth of that style of driving was. And one of the things that makes me most sad about the fact that we lost Senna is that we never got to see what that Senna would have been like.
Yeah.
And I think it would have, we would have seen a completely different Ayrton Senna in the second half of the 90s, and I think it would have been beautiful to see it. But we were robbed.
That was quite the damn shame that we never got to see that evolution, right? Because I also think that there's an element of, as you go forward in your careers, we all mature a certain way, right? We're not as brazen as we probably might be at the beginning.
Exactly.
And I think that evolution is, and I think in some ways, I have to admit, I've enjoyed Max's evolution this year, particularly. Like, I found him to be more likable. Not that I disliked him particularly, but I certainly found him to be more likable. Now, on the other hand, Red Bull had been so dominant this year that it sort of gets lost in the element of it. But I can't wait to see what that looks like, right? And personally, for me, I hope that Ferrari are in the mix for just this reason, is to just kind of add some spice to the whole thing and see if Leclerc can get up there with them. Because that, I think, is he's an interesting driver too, right? Talking about all of this, and we haven't quite seen what he's capable of it, but he's also shown elements of being able to manage races and go fast. But I don't quite know what his true identity is, at least from what I've seen so far. Yeah,
I mean, Leclerc's big problem at the moment is that he's in a team where he can't purely focus on the job that he's got, because one, he's got a teammate on the other side of the garage that is able to think more independently in the cockpit when the team are making strategic errors. And second, he's in a team that are making strategic errors and operational errors and have reliability issues. So he's got a lot more to worry about. So I think we saw Leclerc in a kind of, his first season fighting for a title, well, in an environment that wasn't conducive to him winning a title. The car notwithstanding, the other ingredients that I think you need, that Max has, apart from his driving skill, he's got a strategy team that will make the right calls in give and take situations. And operationally, they'll do a pit stop in under 2 seconds. 1.82, I think, is the record now, isn't it?
It's amazing.
it's unreal, isn't it? But that gives you the confidence that if you do your best and give everything that you can, your team have got your back as well. And I don't think Charles has got that at the moment.
No, he doesn't.
And not to drag up our previous conversation, the question that he's got to ask himself is that going to happen at Ferrari? But if it isn't, where's he going to go? Because I don't see a.
That's the problem, right? If Lewis decides to continue, right, which it seems like he is going to continue, then pretty much all roads are closed. And I think you have to, I think you're absolutely spot on with that, right? Because you could see the pressure of all of those mistakes, sort of accumulate at France, right? I mean, that was the one sort of like real, you could say Imola to some extent, but that wasn't as drastic in the scheme of the final result. So perhaps that too, maybe a little bit, trying to push your luck. And that was quite early in the season. So I guess you could say that, but I think you saw the weight of all of that sort of show up in France, right? It was really just sort of, wow, I need to make something happen kind of thing. And so, I hope that that's not the case moving forward, but we'll see. But that's just how it is, right? Maybe with his old boss back in the mix, maybe there's a level of comfort there. And, it'd be interesting. I'm also interested to see how 23 will play out in the scheme of Mercedes. And if they are dominant again, like, will they favor one driver over another? I mean, that's still, given all of their issues in 22, that sort of became a non-topic, right? Non sort of issue. Although it did come up slightly in Brazil, right? We saw
Yeah,
that come up
yeah,
there. So I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that'd be
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, George isn't going to be a pushover. So let me ask you, because I've talked quite a bit. Like, what with the Mercedes dynamic, what do you think the the cards hold for that team if they build a competitive car next season? How do you think the title will
Well,
go?
I think there's an element of what you just said before, right? With all the Alonso, Lewis talk, and even Max talk about what the car is at the beginning of the season versus what it is when it's more developed. And clearly Lewis would have miles on George in terms of the ability to adapt throughout the season and manage a season and all that. I think though it is interesting because Lewis hasn't quite, I mean, after 2016, these last 6 years, 5 years, right, that he's been dominant, and even though he didn't win in 21, he's had a sidekick that really has not pushed him in the way that I think George can. And I think that'd be interesting. I mean, I think shades of this you can sort of go back to 2016 and even 2015 and I guess 2014 too, right? You could say that some of that was there when he was getting pushed by Nico, right? And this will be interesting though, because George is he's young, he's hungry, and in a different way, and he's seeing what Max is doing. He's seeing probably what Lando's getting in terms of treatment and priority at McLaren, whatever that might mean in the scheme of things. I think that's interesting. I think I'm hoping to see some fireworks, to be honest, because I'm all in it for the entertainment aspect of it. Like this,
and if you see fireworks at Mercedes, let's say there's not even fireworks. Let's just say that they're both. Let me step back from that a second. You've got two quick motivated drivers at Mercedes, and you've got Max in a Red Bull, that in a team that's built around him. Who prevails in a championship showdown?
That's really difficult to say, right? If I had a crystal ball, I would know. I would be looking through it to see when Ferrari is going to win the next drivers' championship. But I think this is why you need two dominant drivers. I mean, this goes back to my Alonso comment, right? Like having two drivers that are in there
in the same team
are great. I mean, no two personalities are no two personalities are the same. No two sets of personalities are the same. No two teams are the same. But Mercedes have shown that they will let drivers drive and race each other even when it's been catastrophic.
Yeah, but Amar, if those two cars aren't too far away from each other in performance, I'm thinking like in 2007 between the McLaren and the Ferrari, or 1986 between the Williams and the McLaren. If you've got two dominant drivers, if you've got two alphas in Mercedes, does that help them or hinder them?
At the moment, I would say it helps them, right? Because you are still coming out of these new regulations, and the car has been, they've had to take a step back in terms of that. So depending on how they can manage it, and every indication is that Mercedes have a really good organization set up and to be able to do that. Right?
However good your organization is, right? That if you've got two guys that are taking points off each other, and then one guy that has his whole team built around him.
So this is what I love and hate about Formula One, right? I love and hate this aspect of it, that you have to, on the one hand, I want racers to race regardless of what teams they're in and if they're teammates or not. And on the other hand, I think from what should be done perspective, what's the right way to tackle this? You do want to select one guy. And I think this is interesting, right? Because again, Toto Wolff is also a personality in all of this. Like he is not, he is just as large as the rest of the sport, right? In many ways. I don't know. I don't know what to do, to be honest. Like I would turn this question back over to you, because you're the guy who has a vested interest in this. I'm hoping for fireworks in part because I would like to see a repeat of 2007. I put that out there, but I don't know. I don't know what you do. I mean, obviously, there's probably a strategy involved in deciding when to sort of pick one driver and have your support behind it. I also think it depends on how they perform, in the first 5-6 races. I mean, the season's so long now; it's 23 races, or it's crazy with the
I guess the way I guess the way I see this, right, is if you've got 3 drivers in the mix and you've got 2 of those drivers alphas in one team, and that team is, okay, 2 scenarios. One, the Mercedes is massively dominant, right? And the Red Bull becomes a sort of second tier car again, as it has been up until 2021. I think you'll have an internal fight between Lewis and George, and one of those 2 will come out on top. Who that will be, I don't know. I guess if I had to call it, I'd say probably Lewis, because he's been in a title fight many times before, and he has shown that he can elevate himself when you need to. But that's conjecture, and it can go the other way, right? Let's say the 2 cars are similar in performance. Now, as long as the 2 drivers in the Mercedes don't take each other out, you'd expect that there will be you'd expect that over the course of the season there'll be a rotating cast of who's 1, 2, and 3, right? But even within a team, I think one of those 2 drivers, either Lewis or George, will impose themselves upon the other, because it always happens, just by natural selection within a team. Very rarely have I seen it that 2 drivers are just for the whole season completely neck and neck, no matter how good they are. Even in the Lewis and Nico Rosberg days, 14 and 15, he had Nico, right? And even in 16, but for some bad starts and some reliability, he had Nico that season as well. You go back to sort of 88, it was probably 88, 89, you had 2 drivers that were actually really equal. And just when you thought one was eking out an advantage, the other one would then come back. And you could see that's why one driver won in 88 and the other driver won in 89. And it was super tight between the 2 of them. But that doesn't happen very often.
But I would also say that the development side of this comes into play, right? Because depending on where they start and how they develop the car and what direction it goes in. I mean, we saw George come back at the end of the season, right? I mean, he did. He was right there with Lewis on.
He still got out qualified in the last race of the season, though.
He did. I mean, they were not in it in Abu Dhabi. They were really not in it. It was just.
And I guess that's it. And you're right. I don't know which way that will go. I don't know which way it will be, but I'd expect that one of them will impose themselves upon the other, and they will be the one that more often than not will finish higher up. So I still think that ultimately, I mean, it makes the Constructors' Championship very easy because that team will win. Sure. But also the driver's title, it probably still means that if those 2 are in that thick of a fight, that they then push the guy in the other car down a rung, or only intermittently either splitting them or ahead of them. So I think the maths still just about works in the favor of the team that has the 2 alpha drivers.
Totally, yeah. Totally. As long as they don't take themselves out, then they should. I mean, exactly. But if it isn't a dominant car, right? That's where I would love. I mean, my dream scenario would be the 3 teams being in the mix, right? Because I don't know if the sort of the budget cap issues that Red Bull had will affect them in 23. I think that remains to be seen. Probably not, but if there is even a slight sort of pullback from where they were at, I think the big wild card is, have Mercedes figured out the issue, right? And again, all signs are they have the ability to do so, but we don't know. And then the wild card really is, are my guys in red? Like, you don't know what that's going to come up with. Like, it could be a disaster. It could be epic for the ages. If that Ferrari engine can be the fastest, the quickest one again, that changes everything again all over.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think if Ferrari turn up with a car that's super dominant, and it's possible because they were fighting a lot of reliability issues on that engine and weren't able to run it at the full performance that it could. If they're able to sort that out for next season, they genuinely have a car that is super dominant, then yeah, that turns all of this on its head, and we're having a completely hypothetical conversation about who's going to finish second rather than first.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think if all three cars are in and around the same place, I still think you'll find that one driver within each team will elevate themselves above the other. And I'm not predicting that will definitely be Lewis at Mercedes. I think that generally what happens is the car is developed to be as fast as it can be, and whoever adapts to that better is going to come out on top within that team.
We've talked about Mercedes, but let me ask you about Ferrari, because that is an interesting dynamic there. I mean, on paper, it would seem like this is Leclerc's team, and maybe with Freddie Vasseur in there, it is. But I mean, Carlos Sainz has a lot of Alonso in him too, in terms of adaptability, in terms of the thinking through things. We haven't been able to see a whole lot. Yes, he struggled at the beginning of the 22 season, but in the glimpses that we have been able to see when the car has been reliable and even overcoming the team's strategy calls. I mean, that says something, right? That's got to count for something.
Yeah, but my worry with Carlos is that although he has the ability to adapt to what the car needs, it's much more of a involved, deliberate process for him, and that takes time. If he doesn't gel with the car immediately, he has to go away and think about how he's driving it and his approach to it, and be in the sim and really understand what he needs to do, and then he will get there. I feel like Leclerc will be able to jump on it straight away. Whatever the car needs, he's able to adapt to that better, just through his own sort of natural ability, and natural ability versus learned behaviors, I think, is a conversation for another day.
I love that.
We should put that on the back burner. But it means that Leclerc will have a head start, and second, I feel that as the car develops more, Leclerc will still be able to adapt to that. And for Carlos, it's always a bit of a moving target. As soon as he hits that peak, he then has to work hard to get back to where Leclerc has got to with the next development that the cars come with, and that just gives Leclerc a natural advantage within that team, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with. I think that even the ability aside, I think that Leclerc is probably the emotional favorite for Ferrari, right? In terms of how they've sort of gone about getting him in there, and then maybe in the Freddie Vasseur hire might have a lot to do with keeping him and them wanting to keep him beyond next year too, right? And sadly for Carlos, I feel like even if they were somehow neck and neck, and let's just say that Ferrari is the dominant team, right, for a second year, and then the two of them are, I don't know, within a few points of each other, maybe a race win of each other, I would see the Ferrari team sort of naturally, gravitate towards Charles and make it that way. And when it comes strategy calls too. So
yeah, I mean, there are other factors that play within that team as well, though, right? That their title sponsor is a Spanish bank, so
that's right.
So I'm sure it's not quite as simple as Ferrari want Charles Leclerc to win. I'm sure there's a little bit of lobbying going on in the background, and that's why they've not been able to very clearly say, even in 2022, Charles Leclerc is our guy, and we're going to back him for the title. One, the fact that Carlos is able to get himself back into contention, and second, the fact that there's some very powerful reasons emblazoned upon the car that suggest that it's not quite as cut and dry that Leclerc will have whatever he wants.
So at the end of the day, the economics of the sport play a big role, just as much as everything,
always,
right?
Yeah, they always do, though, don't they?
Well, and I think this is why Carlos needs to get with it from the get-go and at least be neck and neck, like not have a Melbourne again, right? Like he does, and maybe it's not wins, right? Maybe, but it's just being thereabouts, right? Even that needs to happen from the get. It'd be great if he could win, but
but I think if it's close between the top three, if in terms of car performance, it's not good enough for Carlos to just be there or thereabouts. He needs to be beating his teammate.
Yeah, but he definitely doesn't need to be crashing out, right? That's what he doesn't need, right? That was my point, right? If everything is equal, that's the minimum he needs to. I totally agree with you. I would love to see a Carlos Sainz win in the first 3 races, assuming Ferrari can show up with a car that can do that. But if that's there,
I mean, I mean, just that Melbourne weekend though. I mean,
yeah,
let's not overplay that crash. There was a lot of stuff happening.
sure.
You know, the fact that they changed his steering wheel on the grid, they changed his setup on the grid. You know, he sees his main rival at Ferrari heading off into the distance while he's having a bad start because the start procedure's off. You know, you can understand how those things will stack up and stack up and stack up and then result in what happened. But it was more the performances in Saudi and Bahrain where he just wasn't on Leclerc's pace, was he?
Yeah. No, and I'm with you, but again, we cannot do nuance with Ferrari. Like we've established that the last time we talked, that Ferrari and nuance don't go together. Like that's not. We throw objectivity out of the window. You know, we open the DRS wing wide open just so objectivity can go straight through that. Like that's the whole point of it. We don't do that kind of stuff. But you know, Santander is there, so you know we have to make sure. You know, again, this is. I think that's one of the interesting stories is this sort of wild card between what Mercedes can or cannot come up with, and then what Ferrari does. And I think the only sort of constant we know is that Red Bull will show up with a pretty decent car, albeit with all these issues they have now with the budget cap. I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we don't even talk about the possibility that Red Bull will take a step backwards. And that tells you something about Adrian Newey and his control and over that technical department and his control over the technical regulations, but also the fact that, you know, the head start that they've had, whatever head start was given by going over the cost cap is an enduring one that will not be negated by having a little less time in the wind tunnel and a fewer teraflops of CFD. You know, that's not going to change the competitive order of things.
No,
that they've already gained the advantage of having broken the cost cap.
It's hard to imagine them having that much of an issue this year. Perhaps in 24 we could see it, but but I think it's also interesting where they decide. Again, this is why there's a big part of me that wants Ferrari to show up with the fastest and reliable engine, right? If they can nail a quick car, then I think they can push Red Bull for it. I cannot count on Mercedes right now just because I don't know what their car will look like, and perhaps it will be thereabouts. But if they, you know, who's to say if they don't get it wrong again, right? I mean, it's hard to believe that, but you never know. You just never know.
Yeah, but I think Ferrari and Mercedes have both got an issue in that their strategy has to be top level. Like this has been said by a few different outlets, but Red Bull have gone through seasons and seasons and seasons of not having the quickest car, so they've had to be absolutely on it in terms of strategy to make the most of any tiny opportunity that they've had. Now they've got that strategy sort of dominance, as it were, alongside a competitive car. So those two things make them formidable.
Yeah, totally.
Mercedes this season don't have a car. And I think in 2023, even if they do have a car, their mentality in terms of strategy throughout this season has still been as if they had a car that was a second quicker than everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, all of their strategy was about not losing the position they were in at the moment, whereas Red Bull's strategy was always about how do we gain the next position? You know, how do we improve upon where we are right now? And it's that fundamental difference that mentality that needs to change even at Mercedes for them to be able to compete in an era where their car may not be dominant, where they're nip and tuck with their competitors, and it's marginal calls that will get them ahead when they shouldn't be ahead. And it's something that Red Bull have done brilliantly for years, and it's paying massive dividends right now. They just don't lose races. They just don't lose races. That's going to be difficult to break, I think.
I would agree. Unless there's some fireworks within the team again, it's hard. You have to hope for some level of self-destruction to happen, right? Like it's got to be one of those we could never see extenuating circumstances that like just happen like out of the blue, or maybe because they cannot afford as much in catering now. Who knows? That things might change. That could be one of those
true.
things.
It's true. Nutrition might become more of an
After
issue.
all, yeah. So no more free Red Bull cans at races, like those kind of things. Who knows? Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see any when we were in the US. I didn't get given a free Red Bull when I was in the US. Did you?
We did not pay enough for the VIP pass, which would have made up for their budget shortfall. So
No,
there's that.
man. When I went to Italy in 2014 in Monza, I got at least 2 free cans of Red Bull. They were just giving them out, ice cold ones too. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that's all brilliant marketing, right? And so yeah, I think again in an era where we have to pay twice as much for everything that we consume every day, it's probably not worth it. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. What do we say? What do we say? Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. We should keep exploring what 23 would look like. It'd be fun to prognosticate and see where these lie, see where these come out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me do this.